Hello, my friends. This lecture video is on the problems of politics and also the essence of democracy. The good offered by representative democracy is better than direct democracy. Might I add that a representative democracy is a republic. But yet again, a republic is worth defending from external attacks, as well as the corrosive influence of inherent and acquired internal inadequacies, which need to be identified and remedied in order to preserve it. First, to be examined and clarified are the fundamental principles on which a political and constitutional order must be based in order to be fully democratic. Theorizing has its pleasure, no doubt, but its terminus is too often an ever-receding utopian vision on the horizon, which, for serious government and business, and its impact on human and non-human realities, is not a proper destination due to the fact that practical remedies need to be formulated in response to identifying key weaknesses in the democratic systems that have evolved over the last 2 centuries, namely the 19th and 20th centuries, respectively. This is done in order that the democracy delivers its promise of being by the people, for the people, a government constituted by the authority of the people and answerable to them only, exists in order to serve all of the people's interests, the majority and the minority. Now, I do recall that Liz Vane, the former clerk to the House of Commons, who has unparalleled knowledge of constitutional and parliamentary matters, as well as Sir Palmer, who was the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, on constitutional reform. And so many before have contemplated what democracy entails, the purpose of government, its powers and institutions, its politics and its people, governance and constitutionality. But its benefactors founded it on integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership responsibility. See Book 2 from Ab Ub Condita, from the founding of the city. This is from Livy. And so Livy was a Roman writer. Livy knew the purpose of a constitution, a Roman historian in the Roman Republic. Quote, "The ending of kingly rule enabled the authority of the law to be exalted above that of men." End quote. What does this mean but that law, a constitutional framework, instruments of justice, which can be both oppressive and unjust in their propensity, but yet a constitution forming order, with other conventions and historical transitions, governs the institutions and practices of the state. The question, what principles, then, should govern its formulation and application? And how, then, are they to be justified? We have Acton's dictum, which quotes that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Even excellent constitutions, like the ones of the United States, can be nullified by what happens on the informal side of politics and government. See J.S. Mill on considerations of representative government, which he wrote in 1861. The idea of constitutional morality, or at least what restrains honorable people from bending or manipulating for partisan or injurious purposes the conventions, traditions, and provisions of the constitutional order. Mill only but echoes Voltaire, another political philosopher, writing in the modern philosophy, in his remark about England 1 century preceding that of Mill. See his letters 7 and 9, letters on the English, written in 1733. Its liberties were the result, England, that is, quote, not of the Constitution, the governmental arrangements of the country, but the constitution, character of the people. And so we see a historical study from Han Fei, Chinese man, an ancient Chinese legalist philosopher from the 3rd century BCE, who was echoed by Livy 2 centuries later. The point of view is that government must be a matter of law-governed institutions rather than the happenstance of talent or character in individual people. This is the answer to 2 questions. 1, what happens when the legislature and the government offices come to be populated by said less honorable and principled people, controlled by their particular party whose influence over representatives are great. What happens when the people who populate and operate a democracy's institutions will not abuse the latitude for action they find in them? And so once a government is formed, its duties to the people, the national interest, is prior to party political considerations. As plenipotentiaries and representatives, politics will continue outside and beyond government. Once governments collapse, politicking will still happen. But once a government has been instituted on the basis of an agreed platform of policies among the constituent parties forming it, the executive's implementation of them must be governmental. Because in a good state, government transcends politics. Okay. The possibility of achieving perfection or perfectibilism was part of many debates in the Enlightenment period of the 18th century and beyond. And it was contrasted with the simple, modest possibility of improving things. That was called meliorism. Now, democracy is a continual negotiation. In fact, it is an effort to achieve the best for all as opposed to most or some. And it therefore accepts the cost and limitations of inclusivity. It represents the right of all to participate, and this is its problem. However, it is true that democracy is pragmatic in its idealism, a recognition that government cannot do everything. The collective endeavor expressed through government, constituted by the enfranchised, serve their interests collectively and individually, needs to be oriented by the highest ideals. The lodestar of its endeavors, a meliorist reality in the perfectibilist sense, or hope. So in my past 3 philosophies before Novus Publius, I listed several possibilities for society and a careful analysis of what they are, given the truth that of natural observational insights in regard to libertarianism and liberalism. Libertarianism is about maximizing license for individual and corporate activity to pursue self-identified interests. Liberalism is about valorizing civil liberties while correlatively repeating moral demands for a humane and inclusive society. To put the point tendentiously, the distinction lies in completing construals of libertas, or Latin for liberty. One view is that the license to ignore the rights of others in advancing one's own interests. But another view is a right that others hold this view as well, and it must be respected in all. States which see themselves as democracies and uphold the rule of law, like the states of Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, etc., fit this bill. A recent phenomenon in historical terms, and it is a great advance over preceding circumstances. Think of the absolute monarchies, the oligarchies, the disinvolvement of the great majorities of people by those in possession of the various means of power. The process to remedy this began less than 3 centuries ago. And I give 3 goals for healthy democracy. 1, the democratic demand for inclusivity sufficiently met. 2, equality in the distribution of wealth. 3, equality in social goods. And 4, the conditions met for full participation of all the people within the republic. The major democracies of the advanced world are only partial. They are not healthy. Our century needs constitutional reform. Mind you, I'm not saying throw out the Constitution, only that it needs to be reformed. It needs to be aimed at bringing democracy full in operation, because democracy is about people, the people, all the people, to whom both state and society belong and for whom they exist. The essence of democracy lies in a question: what is the source of power and legitimacy of government in a state? Obviously, because politics is the debate against how power should be distributed in government. So for most of recorded history, the reconstruction of the human past that is remembered, the word democracy was taken to denote a very undesirable way of sourcing authority in a state, for reasons given by Plato in his 8th book in the Republic. Namely, the ignorance, self-interest, short-termism prejudice, envy, and proneness to rivalry widespread among the people. To believe in democracy is to believe that, quote, collective wisdom will emerge from individual ignorance, end quote. And that's a quote from H.L. Mencken. So the idea of democracy involves a dilemma that is complex to solve: how to respect two rights that people have, rights that some think are incompatible with each other, and they could be diametrically opposed. But there is also the right of the people to choose and authorize the very government under which they live. The people's right to have government performing its functions adequately and better than accurately in the complete service to an end of their interests. Democracy, however, in my opinion, is an inefficient way of managing a state. Given the time and energy consumed in debate, the disruptive changes in policy, economic direction, and law, tyrannies are greatly more efficient. But the values that are realizable in a democratic order, i.e., labeled civil liberties and human rights, are a highly significant benefit, for which the inefficiency of democracy is a price worth paying. But what of the life of a man who believes that legal equality can be successfully argued for? He is a complex man, or woman, full of all sorts of characters, fine and multicolored, just like the democratic city, containing many models of constitutions and ways of living. But what about discussing the finest constitution for the finest of humanity?